Hello, what's good with you today? My name's Eve and welcome to my channel. I'm just sitting here enjoying my Sunday, having a little bit of coffee, and I thought I'd jump on camera and talk about my experience working at a startup. So if that's something you're interested in, maybe sit back and grab a beverage and let's get into it. So cheers. So good. I just bought one of those little pour over machines and it makes the best coffee, so definitely recommend. So before we jump into the pros and cons of startup life, I kind of want to give you a little bit of an introduction about myself. So like I said, my name's Eve, and I'm a botanical chemist. I've been practicing herbalism for 4 years now, and I actually got into the industry through a startup, so it kind of all ties together. So basically, I got my degree in chemistry and I did a lot of biochem research when I was doing my undergraduate, and I just fell in love with plants and learning the biochemistry of them, and I knew I wanted to do something like that, but I didn't want to get into the pharmaceutical industry. It wasn't necessarily the path that I wanted to go down. I wasn't really interested in, modern medicine. I was kind of more interested in traditional medicine, so kind of looking for a job that was a little bit different, but where I could still kind of jump more into just plants and the biochemistry of them. And so startups just kept popping up, and so I thought I maybe would check a couple out. So I interviewed at some, and I found one that was really cool. It was a botanical extraction company, so it was perfect, exactly what I was looking for, which is super unique. It's not something I expected, which is definitely kind of cool about the startups. They could literally be anything and everything, because you could start a business with anything and everything, basically. So yeah. Cheers. Yeah, so like I said, I started working for this small botanical extraction company, and we made essential oils, and it was really fun. It was just this makeshift warehouse where we got to build all the equipment we were using. We were making essential oils. We were purifying and distilling different phytochemicals from a variety of plants. It was very, very fun. We got to experiment with a lot of things, and I learned a lot of new skills. And I started out there as their third employee, and as the company grew, I was able to grow with it, and I eventually, when I left that company, I was the lead chemist, head of product development, making all these new products, and just really excelling at the company. And we were actually, at that company, we started a bunch of different subsidiaries, a bunch of smaller companies through that one. So I even gained the experience of starting a business from scratch with that company. And then when I left there, I actually started working at another startup, but this one was way more established. It was established as much, but still a startup, as much as a startup can be established. So it was 3 years old, but it was making 7 figures every year, multiple 7 figures. Quite successful. It had an internet presence, all that. I'm actually still working there, and I'm still enjoying my job. And but I also started just like the other one. I started kind of at more of a, bottom of the totem pole position, just formulation chemist for me, and I was just making the recipes, making the products. But because it's a startup, I was able to grow and work my way up, and it's been about a year, and I'm lab manager and managing all the production and the creation of new products, and it's really, really fun. Yeah. And that kind of leads me into my first major pro of working at a startup, and that is the fact that you can gain experience. You can build a resume. So all of the examples I've given for myself, I've always started at a very minimal position, and I've been able to work my way up in sometimes less than a year. And that is because the teams at startups tend to be really small. And when you have a really small team, it's essential for each employee to be able to wear multiple hats, to do multiple things. So if you go into working there with a mindset of I'm going to get the most out of this, and I'm going to grow with this company, and I'm going to help this company grow, then you can actually definitely gain a whole plethora of different skills. So by the end of the year you might have learned like 10 new things that you didn't even think that you'd be interested in, but because the company needed it, you then gain that skill, and like it's a win-win situation basically. So yeah, that's like the first major pro, is that you can gain experience and then you can just put all of that experience right back on your resume and build your resume. So they are great resume builders. And I know, like, I've heard from a lot of people like, oh, but like it's a startup, like that doesn't look good on your resume because it's not an established company. But what does look good on your resume are like distinct skills that you can do. So like say you work somewhere and you learn digital marketing, like that is like a legitimate skill that sets you apart when you're in a sea of other candidates. So like, yeah, the company might not be established, but you're still learning valuable things. So yeah, definitely a pro. And that leads me into my second major pro, which is because the team is smaller, management tends to hear you more, basically. So if you think about it, like at a more corporate job where you might be one of like many employees doing the same thing, your management might not hear your voice as much as if you are working on a startup where the team is smaller and you might have a more direct line of communication to your management, where there might be like one other person above you, and then they might be talking directly to the president of the company or the CEO. So like anything that like concern you have or good idea you have is more likely to be heard by someone who can actually make it occur in the company compared to like of a more corporate job. At a bigger company and a more corporate job, you're probably dealing with like multiple tiers of management before you reach the CEO. So like if you do have a good idea, you might not be as heard as you would at a smaller company. So I think that's like another major pro, is that you can actually like, just the company tends to be more moldable because it's new, it's small, and management would actually like take into consideration what you have to say, which I think is really neat. And that kind of leads me into my last major pro, and that is because you tend to be essential working in a smaller company, your work tends to be more fulfilling. So you go to work every day, and instead of just feeling like you're doing the same thing over and over and feeling like your job doesn't matter, you know that the tasks that you're completing are like essential to the survival of the company, and that just in and of itself is fulfilling. And I think that's really beautiful, and for me, that's a major pro. So at this point, you're probably thinking, wow, let's do it. I'm gonna work in a startup. I'm just gonna jump right in. This sounds amazing, but I gotta say there are some cons, and I wanna get into those because I think some of them are pretty major cons and need to be taken into consideration before just like completely jumping into startup life. And one of the first major cons, and it's a big one, is because it's smaller, because your roles are essential, there is just higher pressure. Like, yeah, just expect to be working in a higher pressure environment. And, that doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing. Like, as the saying goes, pressure makes diamonds, and where there's pressure, there's opportunity for growth. So you can really set yourself apart if you stay cool, calm, and collective, and you deal with the pressure accordingly. And, if you can remain calm in a high pressure situation, like you can really set yourself apart and like shine like a diamond. So another major con, and it's also a big one, is there tends to be mismanagement in startup life. So with any new company, there comes like bad just business decisions. Like it's unavoidable with a new company in my opinion. Like, just like you're learning all these new things, your bosses are probably learning things as well, and it's going to be growth for everyone involved. So you just have to expect a little bit of mismanagement, and don't let that deter you, because mismanagement is just, once again, an opportunity for growth. Like, if you notice something that's not flowing correctly, where there could be more efficiency or, more production output, or like, say there's, in your customer service, there's like an opportunity for growth or something like that, where you could ensure that the end customer is actually, having a better experience. That might be mismanagement causing that, but you can also create a solution for it and grow the company and set yourself apart and just like work your way up the totem pole. So like, once again, turn a con into a pro. And yes, there might be mismanagement. I mean, and like, if you're in a bad, like a toxic work environment, like obviously get out of it. Like, there is a point to where mismanagement is just not ideal, and like, then just remove yourself. But if it's small and it's just like easy fixes, suggest them and set yourself apart. Get that bag, honey. I don't know. And that leads me into my last major con, and it's probably the biggest one, and it's definitely the one that I was warned about the most, and that is startups are inherently risky. So if you're like me, like when I was thinking about joining a startup, my dad was like trying to get me not to, because he was just like, there's no financial security, like you don't know from one day to the next day like if the company's going to exist. And he wasn't wrong. Like there's just inherent risk. Like with any new company, there is a chance that company is just going to go under, and it might go bankrupt, and it just might not exist one day. But in my mind, that's not necessarily a reason to say no to working at a startup, because on the flip side, that company might blow up and it might get extremely successful, and then you were there at the start of that and you get to reap the rewards. So there's two sides to every coin. So like, and I've actually worked at startups that have gone bankrupt, followed up by startups that have been extremely successful. So there is inherent risk there, but just like be aware of the company, and you can like do a little bit of vetting too, like before you even accept a job. Like in your interview, ask questions to like get a feel for the company more. Like, don't just answer questions, like ask them yourself, do some research before you even go to the interview. Look at their website, see if it's got a good Alexa ranking, see if they have like a good social media presence, because all of that is like indications that you're working, or you might be working at like you're looking at a successful company. So yeah, you can definitely like mitigate some risk, but you have to just accept that there might be, there's just risk in it. But I don't think that should deter anyone from working at a startup. Like, I highly recommend everyone to work at a small business at some point in their life, because I guarantee you're going to learn something. Even if it's just like one small thing that you learn, like that's something that you didn't know before, and it's something, I don't know. I just highly recommend everyone to try working at one. It's definitely an opportunity for growth. So, kind of sums up my experience and my thoughts on working at a startup. I definitely recommend it to everyone. I know working at the ones I've worked at has completely changed my perspective on life, and it's actually given me a lot of drive, and I want to start my own business because of my experience, and I think that's what I want to turn this channel into. So if you enjoyed this video and you're interested in more like the journey of starting your own business, or just like more startup tips, like definitely stay tuned. That's what I want to jump into. Like, I've got a lot of experience and I just want to share my knowledge. So, and I definitely don't know everything, so hopefully I'm going to learn something new on this journey. Yeah, and hopefully you learn something too. So yeah, if you like this video, like, subscribe if you want, and it was lovely to meet all of you. Have a beautiful day.